There's a number of special Sundays in the church calendar each year. Easter and Christmas, obviously, and then there's Pentecost and Trinity Sunday and All Saints, to name a few. But there's more that are a little more obscure that many of us may not be aware of, and this is one of those Sundays. The fourth Sunday after Easter, which is designated as Good Shepherd Sunday. And shout out to Ian, who reminded me of this last week. Across the 3 years of the lectionary, Good Shepherd Sunday features 3 readings from chapter 10 of the Gospel of John. But this concept of Jesus as the Good Shepherd is not limited to John. It's a pretty prominent concept within Christian theology. But the reading you've just heard might be a little less known. We're probably more familiar with the readings that was scheduled for last year, which begins, "I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." But as we heard in this reading, it continues to explore the idea of Jesus as the Good Shepherd. But before we get to exploring that idea for ourselves, there's more to this reading that is worth our attention. So let's start at the beginning. At that time, the festival of the dedication took place in Jerusalem. Now this is one of those lines that, unless we're familiar with Jewish religious festivals, may just pass us by. Does anyone know what the festival of the dedication is, or what it perhaps is more commonly known as? No? Thanks for speaking on behalf of everyone today. Yeah. The festival of dedication is what we might know as Hanukkah, or the festival of lights. And the centerpiece of Hanukkah is the lighting of a 9-branch menorah. The center candle is used to light each of the 8 other branches across 8 days. And this is to remember the stories of 1 and 2 Maccabees, and particularly the time where the Jews had been in conflict with the Greeks and discovered that they only had 1 day's worth of sacred oil to burn in the temple. As the story goes, that oil miraculously burned for 8 days, hence the 8 days of Hanukkah. But perhaps more important for us is that Hanukkah is about the rededication or the consecration of the temple. It's ultimately about ensuring that the temple was indeed a holy place and re-preparing it for its role as the centre of Jewish faith. And this is important because this is because they are in the midst of the festival that the Jews come to Jesus with their query. As an important side note, it's worth noting that the term Jews in John's Gospel is not used to describe the entire Hebrew population, but rather a subset of community leaders with links to the religious authorities. A possible comparison for us today, something similar, is people who speak of the silent majority, who are actually not either silent or a majority usually. So it is these people, these community leaders, these people aligned with the religious authorities who are referred to as the Jews, and they come to Jesus with their question during the festival of dedication, a time when they are in the midst of dedicating and appreciating the holiness of the temple. And so when they come to Jesus with their query, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly," you can almost hear them wrestling with how this person called Jesus, who they themselves had already seen do some amazing things, how does he fit into their religious system of purity and holiness that is marked by the temple? Spoiler alert, he doesn't. But what comes to mind to me when I hear this query of the Jews is the concept of Shibboleth. Who knows about Shibboleth? It's really disappointing, people. Disappointing. Because if you knew what Shibboleth meant, you'd either meant you were a student of Hebrew Bible or you're a student of the television show West Wing. And I'm a little disappointed that you're neither of those things right now. Maybe. So, the concept of Shibboleth comes from the book of Judges, chapter 12. Then Jephthah gathered all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim because they said, "You are fugitives from Ephraim, you Gileadites, in the hearts of Ephraim and Manasseh." Then the Gileads took the fords of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. Whenever one of the fugitives of Ephraim said, "Let me go over," the men of Gilead would say to him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" When he said, "No," they said to him, "Then say Shibboleth." And he said, "Sibboleth," for he could not pronounce it right. Then they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan, 42,000 of the Ephraimites fell that day. To help us visualize this scene, here's an artist's rendition. Often we find ourselves, when we are in the book of Judges, with the need to recognise and to put aside the horrific narratives of genocide, and this is no exception, but hopefully this is assisted by the sanitary presence of Lego. But there's something really important for us in this concept of shibboleth. The word shibboleth originally meant the part of the plant that contained the grain, which doesn't hold a lot of impact for us, but because of this story in Judges, the word shibboleth has taken on new meaning. A shibboleth is any word or phrase or custom or tradition that distinguishes one group from another. It's a code word that allows us to figure out who is in and who is out. It's pretty likely that we all have shibboleths that help us to navigate the world around us. I have been taught a shibboleth in regards to reading theology books. So what I do before I do anything else is I turn to the index or the reference list and see who the author uses as their sources. If I see mainline giants like Bard or Bonhoeffer or Moltmann or so on, then I can have a degree of confidence that this particular book is theologically sound. If such names don't appear, then I'm likely to approach that book with a degree of caution or perhaps pass it over entirely. But something to be mindful of is that there are negative properties of shibboleth. One of the steps in becoming an ordained minister in the Uniting Church is to present yourself to a full presbytery meeting. Presbyteries are local collections of congregations. In Sydney Presbytery, which we are in, for example, includes all the congregations from Bondi to Homebush, as well as some other entities like schools and aged care facilities. A presbytery meeting is a meeting of all the ministers within that area, as well as lay representatives from the congregations. And so, as a ministry candidate, we go before these meetings and we give a 5 to 10 minute testimony of our faith journey and our sense of call to ordained ministry. And then the presbytery, the people in that meeting, have the opportunity to ask you questions about whatever they like. And it's a bit of a daunting experience, as you could imagine. When I went through this process, there was one particular minister who has since retired, who would ask every ministry candidate the exact same question. Do you believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus? Now, on the surface, this might seem like a reasonable question. The issue was that this minister was using it as a shibboleth, and indeed as a weapon. If he didn't get the specific answer that he was looking for, then you were dead to him as a ministry candidate. He needed the code word, and if you didn't give it to him, then you had no place being a minister in his mind. There was something incredibly limiting rather than liberating at work. And if we go back to my theology book example, there are dangers present here too, because if we were to limit our theological intake by purely the establishment, which is for the most part dead white dudes, we are in danger of missing out of a new prophetic word that might come to us from the unknown or from the unexpected. We might miss the movement of the Spirit beyond our regular comfort zone. So shibboleths are important. They can be useful, but they can also be misused. And so when we return to our reading from John and the query of the Jews, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. We need to ask some questions. Is this a shibboleth moment? And if so, what sort is it? Now, because I'm the one standing here and because I spent the last several minutes considering the concept of shibboleth, I'm going to invite you to join me in saying, yes, this is a shibboleth moment. But what kind of shibboleth moment is it? The good kind? The bad kind? Some other kind? Because in a similar vein to the questioning minister, on the surface it could seem like the query of the Jews is a sensible one. If Jesus is the Messiah, then it should be fairly reasonable for him to say plainly, yes, he is the Messiah. But as we continue the story and we hear the words of Jesus, we discover that there is much more going on here. I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name testify to me, but you do not believe. Jesus' exasperation is tangible. They just don't get it. Jesus and the Jews are at cross purposes, and I think it's because of the shibboleth of the word Messiah. For the Jews, imagining the Messiah would invite its closest comparisons with King David, the warrior king, the one who took Israel to prosperity through conquest and the destruction of Israel's enemies. That is the Messiah they are looking for. The mountains of skulls, rivers of blood kind of ruler that would see their own positions of privilege within Jewish society retained and hopefully even elevated. This becomes their shibboleth, their code word. This is what they are looking for. And they clearly see there's some potential in Jesus through the miracles that he has performed and this following that he has developed. But at the same time, they are miffed by his actions, like the way he cleansed the temple, or the way he interacts with the Gentiles, or the way he just keeps breaking all the rules. Is he the Messiah or not? And on Jesus' end, we can see the conflict held in the query, because Jesus is the Messiah, but not the kind that they are looking for. He is not the warrior king. Jesus is the good shepherd. His words and actions, his ministry, have pointed to no other conclusion, and yet the power of shibboleth means the Jews just can't see it. They are blinded by their own rigidity to the law, to their expectation of what a Messiah should be, and so cannot see Jesus for the Messiah that he is. But there are those who can. My sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. These words invite real depth into our understanding of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, particularly in the light of Easter, because Easter is about resurrection. It is about life overcoming death. It is about affirming that Jesus is risen and that Jesus is alive. And if Jesus is alive, then so is his voice. And so our role as the sheep of the Good Shepherd is to listen to it. Listen for the voice of the Good Shepherd, to hear it in the midst of the complexity of our world. And we are invited to no longer then be bound by the old law, but the law that we needed as children, but instead be liberated by the grace that we find in the risen Christ. But it's not only a space of liberation for us, but a challenge, because we too can be limited by our shibboleths. We too can put our expectations upon Jesus, shaping him in our own image, boxing him into our own biases and assumptions. We can turn Jesus into our own code word, our own shibboleth. And when we do that, we make ourselves the shepherds, and we turn Jesus into a sheep. Here at Leichhardt, let us not make that mistake. Let's not mould Jesus into our image, but be moulded into the image of Jesus. Let us listen to his voice, a voice that we know, a voice that speaks of compassion and speaks of justice and healing, and most importantly, speaks of love. Let us listen to that voice and hear what it is saying to us in this place and follow. This is liberating, because it means that we don't have to have all the answers. We don't need to pretend that we are the holders of ultimate truth. And it means that we can truly be resurrection people, a people who hold to the belief that Jesus is alive and is still engaged in this world. We don't need to see the Bible as the holder of ultimate truth, but as what it should be, the witness and testimony to Jesus Christ, the Good Shepherd, the living Word of God that cannot be contained in the Bible, that cannot be contained to the law, that cannot be contained to the tomb or the church or to any shibboleth that we may create. Jesus is the Good Shepherd, and we are his sheep. Praise be to God. Amen.